All right, let's dive into one of the most incredible origin stories in the tech world. We're talking about Kioxia, the world's second biggest maker of NAND flash memory. That's the stuff that powers pretty much everything we use. And believe me, its story is a wild ride of corporate collapse, high-stakes geopolitical chess, and a desperate gamble just to survive.
So let me ask you this. What if I told you that the tiny little memory chip inside your phone, the one holding all your photos, your apps, your entire digital life, is only here today because of a massive accounting fraud and a completely failed American nuclear power company? It sounds crazy, right? Well, let's unpack how a total corporate catastrophe somehow gave birth to a new titan in the semiconductor industry.
For decades, Toshiba wasn't just another company. It was a pillar of what they called Japan Inc. And its single greatest innovation was NAND flash memory, which it invented way back in 1987. This thing was, and I'm not exaggerating, its crown jewel. But by 2017, a perfect storm was brewing that would force Toshiba to sell its most prized possession, literally just to stay alive.
What happened was Toshiba got hit by two completely separate disasters at the exact same time. On one side, you had this deep internal rot from a years-long accounting scandal, and on the other, a devastating external shock from a nuclear bet that went horribly wrong. It was a 1-2 punch that would absolutely cripple the company.
So that internal rot, it was totally systemic. You had senior management pushing these impossible profit targets they called challenges onto their divisions. And in this super rigid culture that just punished failure, managers really only had one way out. They had to cook the books. They started booking future profits early, pushing off losses, basically bending every accounting rule they could. The culture didn't just allow fraud, it pretty much demanded it.
And the scale of this problem was just staggering. When investigators finally cracked the case in 2015, they found that Toshiba had overstated its profits by nearly $2 billion over a 7-year period. The fraud completely shattered the company's reputation and ended up forcing 3 different CEOs to resign.
And just as Toshiba was reeling from this massive self-inflicted wound, bam, the external shock hit. See, back in 2006, Toshiba had made this colossal $5.4 billion bet on the American nuclear company Westinghouse. But the projects were a complete catastrophe, just bleeding cash through massive cost overruns, until Westinghouse finally went bankrupt in 2017.
That bankruptcy forced Toshiba to absorb a catastrophic loss of $6.3 billion. Think about that. This, on top of the accounting scandal, just blew a hole in its balance sheet so massive that it was facing getting delisted from the stock exchange, which for a company like Toshiba would have been the end.
So, backed into a corner, Toshiba had only one move left: sell the crown jewel. And this set the stage for an $18 billion auction for its memory division. But this wasn't some simple sale, oh no. This was a global chess match for a critical piece of technology, and it pulled in governments and the world's biggest tech companies.
And every single player at the table had completely different motivations. Toshiba just needed cash, and fast. The Japanese government was terrified of this critical technology falling into foreign hands, especially China's. Toshiba's partner, Western Digital, saw a chance to buy its rival, but also feared getting cut out of the picture entirely. And then you had customers like Apple and Dell, who just needed to keep the market competitive to keep their own costs down. The winning bid, which was led by Bain Capital, was an absolute masterpiece of geopolitical engineering. Seriously, it solved everyone's problem at once. First, it brought in U.S. tech giants like Apple as investors to make sure their supply was safe, but cleverly gave them no voting rights. Second, it neutralized another rival, SK Hynix, by giving them a financial stake, their special bonds, but again, no immediate control. And third, and this was crucial, it made sure Japanese companies, including Toshiba itself, kept over 50% of the voting stock. The government was happy. But hold on, there was one last hurdle. Western Digital, believing its partnership contracts gave it veto power, launched this massive legal war to block the sale. For months, the entire $18 billion deal hung in the balance. But by December 2017, they finally reached a settlement. Western Digital dropped its lawsuits, and in return, it got a stronger, long-term joint venture deal. The path was finally clear. With the sale finally done in June 2018, the new independent company needed a clean break. The name Toshiba was, forever tainted by all the scandal. It was time for a completely new identity. So in October 2019, the company rebranded as Kioxia, and the name was actually really symbolic.
It combines the Japanese word for memory, kyoku, with the Greek word for value, axia. It was meant to signal a brand new mission, totally free from the baggage of its old parent company. Now, Kioxia operates under this fascinating model called co-opetition, especially with its biggest rival, Western Digital. Get this. They cooperate to build and run these multi-billion-dollar manufacturing plants, sharing the insane costs. But the second the chips roll out of the factory, they become the fiercest of competitors, bidding against each other to sell to the exact same customers. It's a crazy setup. This weird model has let them survive, for sure, but it hasn't solved their biggest strategic problem: Samsung. Samsung is the undisputed king of NAND flash, commanding over a third of the entire market. Its massive scale gives it these huge advantages, and it leaves everyone else just fighting for the scraps. And this is the strategic logic that has driven years and years of merger talks. You just look at the numbers. Combining Kioxia and Western Digital's market share would create a new powerhouse with nearly a quarter of the market. They'd be a true competitor with the scale to actually take on Samsung. It is, by far, the most logical move in the industry. And that is precisely why it keeps failing.
The business case for a merger is just undeniable. It's a total no-brainer. And yet, the path has been blocked by these huge obstacles that were actually created by the very deal that saved the company in the first place.
This quote right here just captures the core irony of Kioxia's entire story. A merger in 2023 seemed closer than ever, and then it just collapsed at the last minute. It proved that the brilliant solution to the 2017 crisis had, in fact, planted the seeds for the next one. So here are the two deal breakers. First, remember SK hynix, the rival that was brought into the original deal to neutralize them? Well, they used their shareholder position to veto the merger. And why would they do that? Simple. A combined Kioxia Western Digital would knock SK hynix down to a distant number 3 in the market. They had absolutely no interest in creating a more powerful competitor. Second, even if they got past that, the deal would have to get approved by China's regulators, who often use these antitrust reviews to block any deals that strengthen the US-Japan tech alliance.
But this story isn't over. Not by a long shot. Merger talks are apparently back on the table. Kioxia is trying to win over SK hynix with offers of collaboration, while Western Digital is literally restructuring its entire business to make a future deal cleaner. The pressure to consolidate is still immense.
The fate of this merger is so much more than just a business story. It's really a bellwether for the entire global tech industry. The outcome is going to show us whether major strategic decisions are still made based on market logic in boardrooms, or if they're now dictated by national security concerns in the halls of government. Which leaves us with this one final critical question. In our increasingly fractured world, can simple market logic ever overcome geopolitical friction? The future of the memory that's sitting in your pocket and the digital world that it powers may very well depend on the answer.